On this video, I'm going to carry on reading Ralph Waldo Emerson's book on friendship. We're up to page 233, and we're near the bottom of the page. If you have any thoughts, comments, feedback, please feel free to share it in the comment section down below. I look forward to receiving your feedback. It means a lot to me. Please subscribe if you haven't already. I hope your day is going great so far. I want to thank you for taking the time out of your busy day to read with me. It's very kind of you. Please subscribe if you haven't already. I shall now proceed. I'm going to start from the last sentence in the last paragraph. There can never be deep peace between two spirits, never mutual respect, until in their dialogue each stands for the whole world. What is so great as friendship? Let us carry with what grandeur of spirit we can. Let us be silent, so we may hear the whisper of the gods. Let us not interfere. Who set you to cast about what you should say to the select souls, or how to say anything to such? No matter how ingenious, no matter how graceful and bland, there are innumerable degrees of folly and wisdom, and for you to say aught is to be frivolous. Wait, and thy heart shall speak. Wait until the necessary and everlasting empowers you, until day and night avail themselves for your lips. The only reward of virtue is virtue. The only way to have a friend is to be one. You shall not come nearer a man by getting into his house, if unlike his soul only flees the faster from you, and you shall never catch a true glance of his eye. We see the noble afar off, and they repel us. Why should we intrude? Late, very late, we perceive that no arrangements, no introductions, no consuetudes or habits of society would be of any avail to establish us in such relations with them as we desire, but solely the uprise of nature in us to the same degree it is in them. Then shall we meet as water with water, and if we should not meet them, then we shall not want them, for we are already they. In the last analysis, love is only the reflection of a man's own worthiness from other men. Men have sometimes exchanged names with their friends, as if they would signify that in their friend, each loved his own soul. The higher the style we demand of friendship, of course, the less easy to establish it with flesh and blood. We walk alone in the world. Friends such as we desire are dreams and fables, but a sublime hope cheers over the faithful heart. Then elsewhere, in other regions of the universal power, souls are now acting, enduring and endearing, which can love and which we can. Souls are now acting, enduring and endearing, which can love us and which we can love. We may congratulate ourselves that the period of nonage, of follies, of blunders and shame is past in solitude, and when we are finished men, we shall grasp heroic hands in heroic hands. Only be admonished by what you already see, not to strike leaks of friendship with cheap persons where no friendship can be. Our impatience betrays us into rash and foolish alliances, which no good attends. By persisting in your path, though you forfeit, the little you gain, the great. You demonstrate yourself so as to put yourself out of the reach of false relations, and you draw to you the firstborn of the world. Those rare pilgrims, whereof only one or two wander in nature at once, and before whom the vulgar great show as spectres and shadows merely. It is foolish to be afraid of making our ties too spiritual, as if so we could lose any genuine love. Whatever correction of our popular views we make from inside, nature will be sure to bear us out. And, and though it seem to rob us of some joy, will repay us with a greater. Let us feel, if we will, the absolute insulation of man. We are sure that we have all in us. We go to Europe, or we pursue persons, or we read books, and the instinctive faith that those we call it out and reveal us to ourselves. Beggars all. The persons are such as we. The Europe, an old faded garment of dead persons. The books, their ghosts. Let us drop this idolatry. Let us give over this medicancy. Let us even bid our dearest friends farewell and defy them, saying, "Who are you? Unhand me, I'll be dependent no more." Ah, seest thou not, O brother, that thus we part only to meet again on a higher platform, and only be more each other's because we are more our own. A friend is Janus-faced. He looks to the past and the future. He is the child of all my foregoing hours, the prophet of those to come, and the harbinger of a great friend. I do them with my friends as I do with my books. I would have them where I can find them, but I seldom use them. We must have society on our own terms, and admit or exclude it on the slightest cause. I cannot afford to speak much with my friends. If he is great, he makes me so great that I cannot descend to converse. In the great days, presentiments hover before me in the firmament. I will then to dedicate myself to them. I go in that I may seize them. I go out that I may seize them. I fear only that I may lose them, receding into the sky, in which now they are only a patch of brighter light. Then, though I prize my friends, I cannot afford to walk with them and study their visions, lest I lose my own. It would indeed give me a certain household joy to quit this lofty sinking. The spiritual astronomy will search of stars and come down to warm sympathies with you. But then I know well I shall mourn always the vanishing of my mighty gods. It is true, next week I shall have languid moods when I can well afford to occupy myself with foreign objects. Then I shall regret the lost literature of your mind, and wish you were by my side again. But if you come, perhaps you will fill my mind only with new visions, not with yourself, but with your lustres. And I shall not be able any more than now to converse with you. So I will owe to my friends this evanescent intercourse. I will receive from them not what they have, but what they are. They shall give me that which properly they cannot give, but which emanates from them. But they shall not hold me by any relations less subtle and pure. We will meet as though we met not, and part as though we parted not. It has seemed to me lately more possible than I knew to carry a friendship greatly on one side without due correspondence on the other. Why should I cumber myself with regrets that the receiver is not capacious? It never troubles the sun that some of his rays fall wide and vain into ungrateful space, and only a small part of the reflecting planet. Let your greatness educate the crude and cold companion. If he is unequal, he will presently pass away, but thou art enlarged by thy own shining, and no longer a mate for frogs and worms. Thus soar and burn with the gods of the empyrean. It is thought a disgrace to love unrequited, but the great will see that true love cannot be unrequited. True love transcends the unworthy object and dwells and broods on the eternal. And when the poor, interposed mask crumbles, it is not sad, but feels rid of so much earth and feels its independency the sure. Yet these things may hardly be said without a sort of treachery to the relation. The essence of friendship is entireness, a total magnanimity and trust. It must not surmise or provide for infirmity. It treats its object as a god, that it may defy both. Prudence. This next book is on prudence. We are currently on page, what page is that? That is apparently page 237. Prudence. Theme no poet gladly sung. Fear too old and foul too young. Scorn not thou the love of parts and the articles of arts. Grandeur of the perfect sphere, thanks the atoms that cohere. What right have I to write on prudence, whereof I have little, and that of the negative sort? My prudence consists in avoiding and going without, not in the inventing of means and methods, not in adroit steering, not in gentle appearing. I have no skill to make money spend well, no genius in my economy, and whoever sees my garden discovers that I must have some other garden. Yet I love facts and hate lubricity, and people without perception. Then I have the same title to write on prudence that I have to write on poetry or holiness. We write from aspiration and antagonism as well as from experience. We paint these qualities which we do not possess. The poet admires the man of energy and tactics. The merchant breeds his son for the church or the bar. And where a man is not vain and egotistic, you shall find what he has not by his praise. Moreover, it would be hardly honest in me not to balance these fine lyric words of love and friendship with words of coarser sound, and whilst my debt to my senses is real and constant, not to own it in passing. Prudence is the virtue of the senses. It is the science of appearances. It is the utmost action of the inward life. It is God taking thought for action. It moves matter after the laws of matter. It is content to seek health of body by complying with physical conditions, and health of mind by the laws of the intellect. The world of the senses is a world of shows. It does not exist for itself, but has a symbolic character, and a true prudence, or law of shows, recognizes the co-presence of other laws and knows that its own office is subaltern, knows that it is the surface and not center where it works. Prudence is false when detached. It is legitimate when it is the natural history of the soul incarnate. When it unfolds the beauty of laws within the narrow scope of the senses. Let me repeat that. Prudence is false when detached. It is legitimate when it is the natural history of the soul incarnate. When it unfolds the beauty of laws within the narrow scope of the senses. There are all degrees of proficiency and knowledge of the world. It is sufficient to our present purpose to indicate three. One class lives to the utility of the symbol, esteeming health and wealth a final good. Another class live above this mark, to the beauty of the symbol, as the poet and artist, and the naturalist and man of science. I'm going to repeat that, if you don't mind. Another class live about this mark, to the beauty of the symbol, as the poet and artist and the naturalist and man of science. A third class live above the beauty of the symbol, to the beauty of the thing signified. These are wise men. The first class have common sense, the second, taste, and the third, spiritual perception. I have to repeat that because it's very, very deep. So please forgive me for doing so. I'm going to start from the beginning of the paragraph. There are all degrees of proficiency and knowledge of the world. It is sufficient to our present purpose to indicate three. One class live to the utility of the symbol, esteeming health and wealth a final good. Another class live above this mark, to the beauty of the symbol, as the poet and artist and the naturalist and man of science. A third class live above the beauty of the symbol, to the beauty of one thing signified. These are wise men. The first class have common sense. The second, taste. And the third, spiritual perception. Once in a long time, a man traverses the whole scale and sees and enjoys the symbol solidly. Then also has a clear eye for its beauty, and lastly, while he pitches his tent on the sacred volcanic isle of nature, does not offer to build houses and bonds, thereon reverencing the splendor of the god, which he sees bursting through each chink and cranny. The world is filled with the proverbs and acts and winkings of a base prudence, which is a devotion to matter, as if we possessed no other faculties than the palate, the nose, the touch, the eye and ear, a prudence which adores the rule of three, which never subscribes, which never gives, which seldom lends, and asks but one question of any project. Will it bake bread? This is a disease like a thickening of the skin until the vital organs are destroyed. But a culture revealing the high origin of the apparent world and aiming at the perfection of the man at the end degrades everything else as health and body life into means. It sees prudence not to be a several faculty. It sees prudence not to be a several faculty, but a name for wisdom and virtue conversing with the body and its wants. Cultivated men always feel and speak so, as if a great fortune, the achievement of a civil or social measure, great personal influence, a graceful and commanding address, has their value as proofs of the energy of the spirit. If a man loses balance and immerse himself in any trades or pleasures, for their own sake, he may be a good wheel or pin, but he's not a cultivated man. I'll repeat that. If a man loses balance and immerses himself in any trades or pleasures for their own sake, he may be a good wheel or pin, but he's not a cultivated man. The spurious prudence makes the senses final, is the god of sots and cowards, and is the subject of all comedy. It is nature's joke, and therefore literature's. The true prudence limits this sensualism by admitting the knowledge of an internal and real world. This recognition once made, the order of the world and the distribution of affairs and times, being studied with the co-perception of their subordinate place, will reward any degree of attention. For our existence, thus apparently attached in nature to the sun and the returning moon and the periods which they mark, so susceptible to climate and to country, so alive to social good and evil, so fond of splendor, and so tended to hunger and cold and death, reads all its primary lessons out of these books, Prudence does not go behind nature and ask whence it is. It takes the laws of the world whereby man's being is conditioned, as they are, and keeps these laws that it may enjoy their proper good. It respects space and time, climate, want, sleep, the law of polarity, growth and death. They revolve to give bound and period to his being on all sides. The sun and moon, the grateful maladies in the sky, he lies stubborn matter and will not swerve from its chemical routine. Here is planted globe, pierced and belted with natural laws, and fenced and disturbed externally with civil partitions and properties which impose new restraints on the young inhabitant. We eat of the bread which grows in the field. We live by the ear which blows around us, and we are poised by the ear that is too cold or too hot, too dry or too wet. I'm going to have to repeat that because I read that incorrectly. We live by the ear which blows around us, and we are poisoned by the ear that is too cold or too hot, too dry or too wet. Time which shows so vacant, indivisible, and divine in its coming, is slit and peddled into trifles and tatters. A door is to be painted, a lock to be repaired. I want wood or oil, or meal or salt. The house smokes, or I have a headache. Then a tax, and then a fear to be transacted. With a man without a heart or brains, and a stinging recollection of an injurious or very awkward word. These eat up the hours. Do what we can. Summer will have its flies. If we walk in the woods, we must feel mosquitoes. If we go a fishing, we must expect a wet coat. Then climate is a great impediment to idle persons. We often resolve to give up the care of the weather, but still we regard the clouds and the rain. We are instructed by these petty experiences which usurp the hours and years. The hot soil and 4 months of snow make the inhabitant of the northern temperate zone wiser and abler than his fellow who enjoys the fixed smile of the tropics. The islander may ramble all day at will. At night he may sleep on a mat under the moon, and wherever a wild date tree grows nature has, without a prayer even, spread a table for his morning meal. The northerner is perforce a householder. We must brew, bake, salt, and preserve his food, and pile wood and coal. But as it happens, that not one stroke can labor lay tooth out some new acquaintance with nature. And as nature is inexhaustibly significant, inhabitants of these climates have always excellent, the southerner in force. Such is the value of these matters that a man who knows other things can never know too much of these. Let him have accrue perceptions. Let him, if he have hands, handle. If eyes measure and discriminate, let him accept and hive every fact of chemistry, natural history, and economics. The more he has, the less he is willing to spare anyone. Time is always bringing occasions that disclose the value. Some wisdom comes out of every natural and innocent action. The domestic man who loves no music so well as his kitchen clock and the ears which the logs sing to him as they burn on the hearth has solaces which others never dream of. I'm going to repeat that. The domestic man who loves no music so well as his kitchen clock and the ears with the logs sing to him as they burn on the hearth has solaces which others never dream of. The application of means to ends ensures victory in the songs of victory not less in a farm or a shop than in the tactics of party or of war. The good husband finds method as efficient in the packing of firewood in a shed or in the harvesting of fruits in the cellar, as in peninsular campaigns or the files of the Department of State. In the rainy day, he builds a workbench or gets his toolbox set in the corner of the bond chamber and stored with nails, gimlet, pincers, screwdriver, and chisel. Herein he tastes an old joy of youth and childhood. The cat-like love of garrets, presents, and corn chambers, and of the conveniences of long housekeeping. His garden or his poultry yard tells him many pleasant anecdotes. One might find argument for optimism in the abundant flow of this saccharine element of pleasure. In every suburb and extremity of the good world, let a man keep the law, any law, and his way will be strewn with satisfactions. There is more difference in the quality of our pleasures than in the amount. On the other hand, nature punishes any neglect of prudence. If you think the senses final, obey their law. If you believe in the soul, do not clutch at sensual sweetness before it is ripe on the slow tree of cause and effect. It is vinegar to the eyes to deal with men of loose and imperfect perception. Dr. Johnson is reported to have said, if the child says he looked out of the window, when he looked out of that, whip him. Our American character is marked by a more than average delight in accurate perception, which is known by the currency of the byword, quote, no mistake, end quote. But the discomfort of unpunctuality, of confusion, of thought about facts, inattention to the wants of tomorrow, is of no nation. The beautiful laws of time and space, once dislocated by our inaptitude, are holes and dents. If the hives be disturbed by rash and stupid hands instead of honey, it will yield us bees. Our words and actions, to be fair, must be timely. A gay and pleasant sound is the wedding of a scythe in the morning of June. Yet what is more lonesome and sad than the sound of a whetstone or mower's rifle when it is too late in the season to make hay? Scatterbrained and quote afternoon, end quote, men spoil much more than their own affair in spoiling the temper of those who deal with them. I have seen a criticism on some paintings, of which I am reminded, when I see the shiftless and unhappy men who are not true to their senses. The last Grand Duke of Weimar, a man of superior understanding, said, quote, I've sometimes remarked, in the presence of great works of art, and just how, especially in Dresden, how much a certain property contributes to the effect which gives life to the figures, and to the life and irresistible truth. This property is hitting in all the figures we draw the right center of gravity. I mean, the placing the figures firm upon their feet, making the hands grasp and fastening the eyes on the spot where they should look. Even lifeless figures, as vessels and stools, let them be drawn ever so correctly, lose all effect so soon as they lack the resting upon their center of gravity, and have a certain swimming and oscillating appearance. The Raphael in the Dresden gallery, the only great affecting picture which I have seen, is the quietest and most passionless piece you can imagine. A couple of saints and worship the Virgin and Child. Nevertheless, it awakens a deeper impression than the contortions of 10 crucified martyrs. For beside all the resistless beauty of form, it possesses in the highest degree the property of the perpendicularity of all the figures. This perpendicularity we demand of all the figures in this picture of life. Let them stand on their feet and not float and swing. Let us know where to find them. Let them discriminate between where they remember and what they dreamed. Call a spade. Give us fact and honor their own senses with trust. But one man shall dare task another with imprudence. Who is prudent? The men we call greatest, at least in this kingdom. There is a certain fatal dislocation in our relation to nature, distorting our modes of living and making every law our enemy, which seems at last to have aroused all the wit and virtue in the world to ponder the question of reform. We must call the highest prudence to counsel and ask why health and beauty and genius should now be the exception rather than the rule of human nature. We do not know the properties of plants and animals and the laws of nature, though through our sympathy with the same, but this remains the dream of poets. Poetry and prudence should be coincident. Poets should be lawgivers. That is, the boldest lyric inspiration should not chide and insult, but should announce and lead the civil code and the day's work. But now the two things seem irreconcilably parted. We have violated law upon law until we stand amidst ruins, and when by chance we spy a coincidence between reason and the phenomena, we are surprised. Beauty should be the dowry of every man and woman, as invariably as sensation, but it is rare. Health or sound organization should be universal. Genius should be the child of genius, and every child should be inspired. But now it is not to be predicted of any child, and nowhere is it pure. We call partial half-lights by courtesy genius, talent which converts itself to money, talent which glitters today that it may dine and sleep well tomorrow. And society is officered by men of part, as they are properly called, and not by divine men. These use their gift to refine luxury, not to abolish it. Genius is always aesthetic, and piety, and love. Appetite shows to the finer souls as a disease, and they find beauty in rights and balance that resist it. We have found out fine names to cover our sensuality withal, but no gifts can raise intemperance. The man of talent affects to call his transgressions of the laws of the senses trivial, and to count them nothing considered with his devotion to his art. His art never taught him lewdness, nor the love of wine, nor the wish to reap where he had not sowed. His art is less for every deduction from his holiness, and less for every defect of common sense. I'm going to repeat that. His art never taught him lewdness, nor the love of wine, nor the wish to reap where he had not sowed. His art is less for every deduction from his holiness, and less. His art is less for every deduction from his holiness, and less for every defect of common sense. On him he scorned, on him who scorned the world. As he said, the scorned world wreaks its revenge. He that despiteth small things will perish by little and little. Goethe's Tasso is very likely to be a pretty fair historic portrait, and that is true tragedy. It does not seem to me so genuine grief when some tyrannous Richard III oppresses and slays a score of innocent persons, as when Antonio and Tasso, but both apparently wrong each other, one living after the maxim of this world, and consistent and true to them, the other fired with all the divine sentiments, are grasping also at the pleasures of senses, without submitting to their law. That is a grief we all feel, a knot we cannot untie. Tasso's is no infrequent case in modern biography, a man of genius, of an ardent temperament, reckless of physical law, self-indulgent, becomes presently unfortunate, querulous, a quote discomfortable cousin, end quote, a thorn to himself and to others. The scholar shames us by his bifold life. While something higher than prudence is active, he is admirable. When common sense is wanted, he is an encumbrance. Yesterday Caesar was not so great. Today, the felon at the gallows foot is not more miserable. Yesterday, radiant with the light of an ideal world in which he lives, the first of men, and now oppressed by want and by sickness, for which he must thank himself. He resembles the pitiful drivelers whom travels describe as frequenting the bazaars of Constantinople, who skulk about all day, yellow, emaciated, ragged, sneaking, and at evening, when the bazaars are open, slink to the opium shop, swallow a morsel, and become tranquil and glorified seers. And who has not seen the tragedy of imprudent genius, struggling for years with paltry, pecuniary difficulties, at last sinking chilled, exhausted, and fruitless, like a giant slaughtered by pins? Is it not better that a man should accept the first pains and mortifications of his sort, which nature is not slack in sending him, as hints that he must expect no other good than the just fruit of his own labor and self-denial? Health, bread, climate, social position have their importance, and he will give them their due. Let him esteem nature a perpetual counselor, and her perfections that exact measure of our deviations. Let him make the night night and the day day. Let him control the habit of expense. Let him see that as much wisdom may be expected in a private economy as on an empire, and as much wisdom may be drawn from it. The laws of the world are written out for him, and every piece of money in his hand. There's nothing he will not be the better for knowing, were it only the wisdom of poor Richard, or the State Street prudence of buying by the acre to sell by the foot, or the thrift of the agriculturist to stick a tree between whiles, because it will grow whilst he sleeps, or the prudence which consists in husbanding little strokes of the tool, little portions of time, particles of stock and small gains. The eye of prudence may never shut. Iron, if kept at the ironmonger's, will rust. Beer, if not brewed in the right state of the atmosphere, will sour. Timber of ships will rot at sea, or if laid up high and dry, will strain, warp, and dry rot. Money, if kept by us, yielding no rent, is liable to loss. If invested, is liable to depreciation or depreciation of the particular kind of stock. Strike, says the smith, the iron is white. Keep the rake, says the heat maker, as nigh the scythe as you can, and the cart is nigh the rake. Our Yankee trade is reputed to be very much on the extreme of this prudence. It takes banknotes, good, bad, clean, ragged, and saves itself by the speed with which it passes them off. Iron cannot rust, nor beer sour, nor timber rot, nor calicos go out of fashion, nor money stocks deprecate. In the few swift moments in which a Yankee suffers any one of them to remain in his possession, and skating over thin ice, our safety is in our speed. Let him learn a prudence of a higher strain. Let him learn that everything in nature, even motes and feathers, go by law and not by luck, and that what he sows, he reaps. By diligence and self-command, let him put the bread he eats at his own disposal, that he may not stand in bitter and false relations to other men. For the best good of wealth is freedom. Let him practice the minor virtues. How much of human life is lost in waiting? Let him not make his fellow creatures wait. How many words and promises are promises of conversation? Let his be words of fate. When he sees a folded and sealed scrap of paper float around the globe in a pine ship and come safe to the eye for which it was written, amidst a swarming population, let him likewise feel the admonition to integrate his being across all these distracting forces and keep a slender human word among the storms, distances, and accents that drive us hither and thither, and by persistency make the paltry force of one man reappear to redeem its pledge after months and years in the most distant climates. We must not try to write the laws of any one virtue. Looking at that only, human nature loves no contradictions, but it's symmetrical. The prudence which secures an outward well-being is not to be studied by one set of men, whilst heroism and holiness are studied by another. But they are reconcilable. Prudence concerns the present time, person's property, and existing forms. But, as every fact hath its roots in the soul, and if the soul would change, would cease to be, will become some other thing, the proper administration of outward things will always rest on a just apprehension of their cause and origin. That is, the good man will be the wise man, and the single-hearted the politic man. Every violation of truth is not only a sort of suicide in the liar, but it is a stab at the health of human society. On the most profitable lie, the course of events presently lays a destructive tax, while frankness invites frankness, puts the parties on a convenient footing, and makes a business a friendship. Trust men, and they will be true to you. Treat them greatly, and they will show themselves great, though they make an exception in your favor to all the rules of trade. So in regard to disagreeable and formidable things, prudence does not consist in evasion or in flight, but in courage. He who wishes to walk in the most peaceful parts of life with any serenity must screw himself up to resolution. Let him front the object of his worst apprehension, and his stoutness will commonly make his fear groundless. The Latin proverb says, quote, "In battles, the eye is first overcome." Entire self-possession may make a battle very little more dangerous to life than a match at foils or at football. Examples are cited by soldiers of men who have seen the cannon pointed and the fire given to it, and who have stepped aside from the path of the ball. The terrors of the storm are chiefly confined to the parlor and the cabin. The drover of the sailor buffets it all day, and his health renews itself at as vigorous a pulse under the sleet as under the sun of June. I'm just going to repeat that. The drover of the sailor buffets it all day, and his health renews itself at as vigorous a pulse under the sleet as under the sun of June. In the occurrence of unpleasant things among neighbors, fear comes readily to heart and magnifies the consequence of the other party. But it is a bad counselor. Every man is actually weak and apparently strong. To himself he seems weak, to others formidable. You are afraid of Grimm, but Grimm is also afraid of you. You are solicitous of the goodwill of the meanest person, uneasy at its ill will. But the sturdiest offender of your peace and of the neighborhood, if you rip up his claims, is as thin and timid as any, and the peace of society is often kept, because, as children say, one is afraid and the other dares not. Far off men swell, bully and threaten, bring them hand to hand, and they are a feeble folk. It is a proverb that courtesy costs nothing, but calculation might come to value love for its profit. Love is fabled to be blind, but kindness is necessary to perception. Love is not a hood, but an eye water. If you meet a sectary, if you meet a sectary of a hostile partisan, never recognize the dividing lines, but meet on what common ground remains. If only that the sun shines and the rain shines for both, the area will widen very fast, and ere you know it, the boundary mountains on which the eye has fastened have melted into air. If they set out to control, St. Paul will lie and St. John will hate. What low, poor, paltry, hypocritical people an argument on religion will make of the pure and chosen souls. They will shuffle and crow, crook and hide, faint to confess here, only that they may brag and conquer there. And not a thought has enriched either party, and not an emotion of bravery, modesty, or hope. So neither should you put yourself in a false position with your contemporaries by indulging a vein by indulging a vein of hostility and bitterness. Though your views are in straight antagonism to theirs, assume an identity of sentiment, assume that you are saying precisely that which all think, and in the flow of wit and love roll out your paradoxes in solid calm, with not the infirmity of a doubt. So at least shall you get an adequate deliverance. The natural motions of the soul are so much better than the voluntary ones that you will never do yourself justice in dispute. The thought is not then taken hold of by the right handle, does not show itself proportioned, and in its true bearings, but bears extorted horse and half witness, but assume a consent that it shall presently be granted, since really and underneath their external diversities, all men are of one heart and mind. Wisdom will never let us stand with any man or men or an unfriendly footing. We refuse sympathy and intimacy with people as if we waited for some better sympathy and intimacy to come. But whence and when? Tomorrow will be like today. Life wastes itself whilst we are preparing to live. Our friends and fellow workers die off from us. Scarcely can we say that we see now men, new women approaching us. We are too old to regard fashion, too old to expect patronage of any greater or more powerful. Let us suck the sweetness of these affections and consuetudines that grow near us. These old shoes are easy to defeat. Undoubtedly, we can easily pick faults in our company. We can easily whisper names prouder, and that tickle the fancy more. Every man's imagination hath its friends, and life would be dearer with such companions. But if you cannot have them on good mutual terms, you cannot have them. If not the deity, but our ambition, hues and shapes the new relations, that virtue escapes, as strawberries lose their flavor in garden beds. Thus truth, frankness, courage, love, humility, and all the virtues range themselves on the side of prudence, on the art of securing a present well-being. I do not know if all matter will be found to be made of one element as oxygen or hydrogen at last, but the world of manners and actions is wrought of one stuff. And begin where we will, we are pretty sure in a short space the mumbling our 10 commandments. That's the end of prudence. The next book is Heroism. We are currently on page 249, and we are going to discuss heroism. Quote, "Paradise is under the shadow of the swords. May Mahomet." I'll repeat that. Paradise, quote, "Paradise is under the shadow of the swords." End quote. Mahomet. "Ruby wine is drunk by knaves. Sugar spends to fatten slaves. Rose and vine leaf deck buffoons. Thunderclouds are Jovi's festoons. Drooping oft in rests of dread. Lightning knotted round his head. The hero is not fed on sweets. Daily his own heart he eats. Chambers of the great are jails, and headwinds right for royal sails." And the elder English dramatists, and mainly in the plays of Beaumont and Fletcher, there's a constant recognition of gentility, as if a noble behavior were as easily mocked in the society of their age as color in our American population. I'm going to repeat that. In the elder English dramatists, and mainly in the plays of Beaumont and Fletcher, there's a constant recognition of gentility, as if a noble behavior were as easily mocked in the society of their age as color as in our American population. When any Rodrigo, Pedro, or Valerio enters, though he be a stranger, the Duke or Governor exclaims, "This is a gentleman," and proffers civilities without end, but all the rest are slang and refuse. In harmony with his delight and personal advantages, there is in their place a certain heroic cast of character and dialogue, as in Banduka, Sophocles, and Mad Lover, a double marriage, wherein the speaker is so earnest and cordial and on such deep grounds of character that the dialogue on the slightest additional incident in the plot rises naturally into poetry. Among many texts, take the following. The Roman Martius has conquered Athens, all but the invincible spirits of Sophocles, the Duke of Athens, and Dorigen, his wife. The beauty of the latter inflames Martius, and he seeks to save her husband. But Sophocles will not ask his life, although assured that a word will save him, and the execution of both proceeds. Valerius, bid thy wife farewell. Soph, no, I will take no leave. My Dorigen, yonder above, bout Ariadne's crown, my spirit shall hover for thee. Prithee haste. Door, stay, Sophocles, with this tie up my sight. Let not soft nature so transformed be, and lose a gentler sex humanity, to make me see my lord bleed, so 'tis well. Never one object underneath the sun will I behold before my Sophocles. Farewell, now teach the Romans how to die. Mark. I think that's Mark. Is that Mark? Mar, maybe it's just Mar. Strike, strike, Valerius, or Martius. Heart will leap out at his mouth. This is a man, a woman. Kiss thy lord, and live with all the freedom you were wont. O love, thou doubly hast afflicted me, with virtue and with beauty. treacherous heart, my hand shall cast thee quick into my urn. Ere thou transgress this knot of piety. Val, what ails my brother? Soph, Martius, O Martius, thou now hast found a way to conquer me. Dor, O star of Rome, what gratitude can speak fit words to follow such a deed as this? Mar, this admirable Duke Valerius, with his disdain of fortune and of death, captived himself, has captivated me, and though my arm hath ta'en his body here, his soul hath subjugated Martius' soul. By Romulus he is all soul, I think. He hath no flesh, and spirit cannot be jived. Then we have vanquished nothing, he is free, and Martius walks now in captivity. I do not readily remember any poem, play, sermon, novel, or oration that our press invents in the last few years which goes to the same tune. We have a great many flutes and flageolets, but not often the sound of any fife. Yet Wordsworth, Laodamia, and the Ode of Dian, and some sonnets have a certain noble music, and Scott will sometimes draw a stroke like the portrait of Lord Evandale, given by Balfour of Burley. Thomas Carlyle, with his natural taste for what is manly and endearing in character, has suffered no heroic trait in his favorites to drop from his biographical and historical pictures. Earlier, Robert Burns has given us a song or two. In the Herleian Miscellanies, there is an account of the Battle of Lutzen, which deserves to be read, and Simon Oakley's history of the Saracens recounts the prodigies of individual valor with admiration, all more evident on the part of the narrator that he seems to think that his place in Christian Oxford requires of him some proper protestations of abhorrence. But if we explore the literature of heroism, we shall quickly come to Plutarch, who is its doctor and historian. To him we owe the Brasidas, the Dian, the Epaminondas, the Scipio of old, and I must think we are more deeply indebted to him than to all the ancient writers. Each of his, quote, lives, end quote, is a refutation to the despondency and cowardice of our religious and political theorists. A wild courage, a stoicism, not of the schools, but of the blood, shines in every anecdote, and has given that book its immense fame. We need books of this sort, cathartic virtue more than books of political science or private economy. Life is festival only to the wise, seen from the nook and chimney side of prudence. It wears a ragged and dangerous front. The violations of the laws of nature by our predecessors and our contemporaries are punished in us also. Disease and deformity around us certify the infraction of natural, intellectual, and moral laws, and often violation on violation to breed much compound misery. A locked jaw that bends a man's head back to his heels, hydrophobia that makes him bark at his wife and babes, insanity that makes him eat grass, war, plague, cholera, famine indicate a certain ferocity in nature, which, as it had its inlet by human crime, must have its outlet by human suffering. Unhappily, no man exists who has not in his own person become to some amount a stockholder in the sin, and so made himself liable to a share in the expiration. Our culture, therefore, must not omit the arming of the man. Let him hear in season that he is born into the state of war, and that the Commonwealth and its own well-being require that he should not go dancing in the weeds of peace, but warned, self-collected, and neither defying nor shredding the thunder. Let him take both reputation and life in his hand, and with perfect urbanity dare the gibbet and the mob by the absolute truth of his speech and the rectitude of his behavior. Toward all external evil, the man within the breast assumes a warlike attitude and affirms his ability to cope single-handed with an infinite army of enemies. To his military attitude of the soul we give the name of heroism. Its rudest form is a contempt for safety and ease, which makes the attractiveness of war. It is a self-trust which slides the restraints of prudence, and the plenitude of its energy and power to repair the harms it may suffer. The hero is a mind of such balance that no disturbances can shake his will. The hero is a mind of such balance that no disturbances can shake his will, but pleasantly, and as it were merrily, he advances to his own music, alike in frightful alarms and the tipsy mirth of universal dissoluteness. There is somewhat not philosophical in heroism. There is somewhat not holy in it. It seems not to know that other souls are of one texture with it. It has pride. It is the extreme of individual nature. Nevertheless, we must profoundly revere it. There is somewhat in great actions which does not allow us to go behind them. Heroism feels and never reasons, and therefore is always right. And although a different breeding, different religion, and great intellectual activity would have modified or even reversed the particular action, yet for the hero, that thing he does is the highest deed, and not open to the censure of philosophers, of divines. It is the avowal of the unschooled man that he finds a quality in him, that he is negligent of expense, of health, of life, of danger, of hatred, of reproach, and knows that his will is higher and more excellent than all actual and all possible antagonists. I'm going to repeat the last sentence, if you don't mind, dear viewers. It is the avowal of the unschooled man that he finds a quality in him that is negligent of expense, of health, of life, of danger, of hatred, of reproach, and knows that his will is higher and more excellent than all actual and all possible antagonists. Heroism works in contradiction to the voice of mankind, and in contradiction for a time to the voice of the great and good. Heroism is an obedience to a secret impulse of an individual's character. Now, to no other man can its wisdom appear as it does to him, for every man must be supposed to see a little farther on his own proper path than anyone else. Therefore, just and wise men take umbrage at his act, until after some time, little time be past. Then they see it to be in unison with their acts. All prudent men see that action is clean, contrary to a sensual prosperity. Every heroic act measures itself by its contempt of some external good, but it finds its own success at last, and then the prudent also extol. I'll repeat that. All prudent men see that the action is clean, contrary to essential prosperity. For every heroic act measures itself by its contempt of some external good, but it finds its own success at last, and then the prudent also extol. Self-trust is the essence of heroism. It is a state of the soul at war, and its ultimate objects are the last defiance of falsehood and wrong, and the power to bear all that can be inflicted by evil agents. It speaks the truth that it is just, generous, hospitable, temperate, scornful of petty calculations, and scornful of being scorned. I'm going to repeat that. It speaks the truth, and it is just, generous, hospitable, temperate, scornful of petty calculations, and scornful of being scorned. It persists. It is of an undaunted boldness and a fortitude not to be wearied out. Its jest is the littleness of common life. That false prudence which dotes on health and wealth is the butt and merriment of heroism. Heroism, like Plotinus, is almost ashamed of its body. What shall it say then to the sugar plums and cat's cradles, to the toilet compliments, quarrels, cards, and custard, which rack the wit of all society? What joys has kind nature provided for us, dear creatures? There seems to be no interval between greatness and meanness. When the spirit is not master of the world, then it is dupe. If the little man takes the great hoax so innocently, works in it so headlong, and believing is born red and dies grey, arranging his toilet, tending his own health, laying traps for sweet food and strong wine, settling his heart on a horse or a rifle, made happy with a little gossip or a little praise, that the great soul cannot choose but laugh at such earnest nonsense. Quote, indeed, these humble considerations make me out of love with greatness. What a disgrace is it to me to take note how many pairs of silk stockings thou hast, namely these and those that were the peach-colored ones, or to bear the inventory of thy shirts, as one for superfluity and one other for use. End quote. Citizens, thinking after the laws of arithmetic, consider the inconvenience of receiving strangers at their fireside. Reckon narrowly the loss of time and the unusual display. The soul of a better quality thrusts back to unreasonable economy into the vaults of life and says, I will obey the God and the sacrifice and the fire he will provide. Ibn Hukal, the Arabian geographer, describes a heroic extreme in the hospitality of Sargt. In Bukhara, when I was Sargt, I saw a great building like a palace, the gates of which were open and fixed back to the wall with large nails. I asked the reason and was told that the house had not been shut, night or day, for 100 years. Strangers may present themselves at any hour and in whatever number. The master is amply provided for the reception of the men and their animals, and is never happier than when they tarry for some time. Nothing of the kind have I seen in any other country. The magnanimous know very well that they who give time or money or shelter to the stranger, so it will be done for love and not for ostentation, do as it were put God on the obligation to them. So perfect are the compensations of the universe. In some way the time they seem to lose is redeemed, and the pains they seem to take remunerate themselves. These men fan the flame of human love and raise the standard of civil virtue among mankind. But hospitality must be for service and not for show, or it pulls down the host. The brave soul raises itself too high to value itself by the splendor of its table and draperies. It gives what it hath, and all it hath. But its own majesty can lend a better grace to bannocks and fair water than belong to city feasts. The temperance of the hero proceeds from the same wish to do no dishonor to the worthiness he has, but he loves it for its elegancy, not for its austerity. Seems not worth his while to be solemn and denounce with bitterness flesh eating or wine drinking, the use of tobacco or opium or tea, or silk or gold. A great man scarcely knows how he dines, how he dresses, but without railing or precision, his living is natural and poetic. John Eliot, an Indian apostole, drank water and said of wine, "It is noble, it is a noble, generous liquor, and we should be humbly thankful for it. But as I remember, water was made before it. Better still is the temperance of King David, who poured out." Let me go back. "A great man scarcely knows how he dines, how he dresses, but without railing or precision, his living is natural and poetic." John Eliot, the Indian apostle, drank water instead of wine. Quote, "It is a noble, generous liquor, and we should be humbly thankful for it. But as I remember, water was made before it." End quote. Better still is the temperance of King David, who poured out on the ground unto the Lord the water which 3 of his warriors had brought him, to drink at the peril of their lives. It is told of Brutus that when he fell on his sword after the battle of Philippi, he quoted the line of Euripides, quote, "O virtue, I have followed thee through life, and I find thee at last but a shade." End quote. I doubt not the hero is slandered by the report. The heroic soul does not sell its justice and its nobleness. It does not ask to dine nicely and to sleep warm. The essence of greatness is the perception that virtue is enough. Poverty is its ornament. It does not need plenty and can very well abide its laws. But that which takes my fancy most in the heroic class is the good humor and hilarity they exhibit. It is a height to which common duty can very well attain. To suffer and to deal with solemnity. But these rare souls set opinion, success, and life at so cheap a rate that they will not sue their enemies by petitions or the show of sorrow, but wear their own habitual greatness. Scipio, charged with peculation, refuses to do himself so great a disgrace as to wait for justification, though he had the scroll of his accounts in his hands, but tears it to pieces before the tribunes. Socrates' condemnation of himself to be maintained in all honor in the Prytaneum during his life, and Sir Thomas More's playfulness at the scaffold are of the same strain, and Beaumont and Fletcher's, quote, "sea voyage," end quote. Juletta tells the stout captain and his company, "Jule, why, slaves, it is in our power to hang ye." "Master, very likely 'tis in our powers then to be hanged and scorn ye." These replies are sound and whole, sport in the bloom and glow of their perfect health. The great will not condescend to take anything seriously. All must be as gay as the song of a canary, though it were the building of cities or the eradication of old and foolish churches and nations which have cumbered the earth long thousands of years. Simple hearts put all the history and customs of this world behind them, and play their own game in innocent defiance of the blue laws of the world. And such would appear to we see the human race assembled in vision, like little children frolicking together, though to the eyes of mankind at large they wear a stately and solemn garb of works and influences. The interest these fine stories have for us, the power of a romance over the boy who grasps the forbidden book under his bench at school, our delight in the hero, is the main fact to our purpose. All these great and transcendent properties are ours. If we dilate in beholding the Greek energy, The Roman pride, it is that we are already domesticating the same sentiment. Let us find room for this great guest in our small houses. The first step of routines will be to disabuse us of our superstitious associations with places and times, with numbers and size. Why should these words, Athenian, Roman, Asia, and England, so tingle in the ear? Where the heart is, there the muses. There the gods sojourn, and not in any geography of fame. Massachusetts, Connecticut River, and Boston Bay. You think paltry places, and the ear loves names of foreign and classic topography. But here we are, and if we will tarry a little, we may come to learn that here is best. See to it only that thyself is here, and art and nature, hope and fate, friends, angels, and the Supreme Being shall not be absent from the chamber where thou sittest. Epaminondas, brave and affectionate, does not seem to us to need Olympus to die upon, nor the Syrian sunshine. He lies very well where he is. The jerseys were handsome, ground enough for Washington to tread, and London streets for the feet of Milton. A great man makes his climate genial in the imagination of men, and its ear the beloved element of all the noblest minds. The pictures which fill the imagination and reading the actions of Pericles, Xenophon, Columbus, Bayard, Sidney, Hampton, the pictures which fill the imagination in reading the actions of Pericles, Xenophon, Columbus, Bayard, Sidney, Hampton, teach us how needlessly mean our life is, that we by the depth of our living should deck with more than regal or national splendor, and act on principles that should interest man and nature in the length of our days. We have seen or heard of many extraordinary young men who never ripened, or whose performance in actual life was not extraordinary. When we see their ear and mien, when we hear them speak of society, of books, of religion, we admire their superiority. They seem to throw contempt on our entire polity and social state. Theirs is the tone of a youthful giant who is sent to work revolutions, but they enter an active profession, and the foaming colossus shrieks to the common size of man. The magic they use was the ideal tendencies which always make the actual ridiculous. I'm going to read it again. The magic they use was ideal tendencies which always make the actual ridiculous. But the tough world has its revenge the moment they put their horses of the sun to plow in its furrow. They found no example and no companion, and their hearts fainted. What then? The lesson they gave in their first aspirations is yet true, and a better valor and a purer truth shall one day organize their belief. Or why should a woman liken herself to any historical woman, and think because Sappho or Savigny or De Stael or the cloistered souls who have had genius and cultivation do not classify the imagination and the serene? Themis none can, certainly not she. Why not? She has a new and unattempted problem to solve. Perchance that of the happiest nature that ever bloomed. Let the maiden with erect soul walk serenely on her way. I'll repeat that again. Let the maiden with erect soul walk serenely on her way. Accept the hint of each new experience. Search in turn all objects that solicit her. That she may learn the power and the charm of her newborn being, which is the kindling of a new dawn in the recesses of space. The fair girl who repels interference by a decided and proud choice of influences so careless of pleasing, so wilful and lofty, inspires every beholder with somewhat of her own nobleness. The silent heart encourages her. O friend, never strike sail to a fear. Come into port greatly, O sail with God. The seas. Not in vain you live, for every passing eye is cheered and refined by the vision. The characteristic of heroism is its persistency. All men have wandering impulses, fits, and starts of generosity. But when you have chosen your path, abide by it, and do not weakly try to reconcile yourself with the world. The heroic cannot be the common, nor the common the heroic. Yet we have the weakness to expect the sympathy of people in those actions whose excellence is that they outrun sympathy and appeal to a tardy justice. If you would serve your brother because it is fit for you to serve him, do not take back your words when you find that prudent people do not commend you. Adhere to your own act and congratulate yourself if you have done something strange and extravagant and broken the monotony of a decorous age. It was high counsel that I once heard given to a young person. Quote, always do what you are afraid to do. End quote. A simple manly character need never make an apology, but should regard its past action with the calmness of Phocion, when he admitted that the event of the battle was happy, yet did not regret his dissuasion from the battle. There is no weakness or exposure for which we cannot find consolation in the thought. This is a part of my constitution, part of my relation and office to my fellow creature. Has nature covenanted with me, or covenanted with me, that I should never appear to disadvantage, never make a ridiculous figure? Let us be generous of our dignity, as well as our money. Greatness, once and forever, has done with opinion. We tell our charities, not because we wish to be praised for them, not because we think they have great merit, but for our justification. It is a capital blunder, as you discover when another man recites his charities. To speak the truth, even with some austerity, to live with some rigor of temperance, or some extremes of generosity, seems to be an ascertain which common good nature would appoint to those who are at ease and in plenty, in sign that they feel a brotherhood with the great multitude of suffering men. And not only need we breathe and exercise the soul by assuming the penalties of abstinence, of death, of solitude, of unpopularity, but it behooves the wise man to look with a bold eye into those rare dangers which sometimes invade men, and to familiarize himself with disgusting forms of disease, with sounds of execration, and the vision of violent death. Times of heroism are generally times of terror, but the day never shines in which this element may not work. The circumstances of man, we say, are historically somewhat better in this country and at this hour than perhaps ever before. More freedom exists for culture. It will not now run against an axe at the first step out of the beaten track of opinion. But whose is heroic will always find crisis to try his edge. Human virtue demands her champions and martyrs, and the trial of persecution always proceeds. It is but the other day that the brave Lovejoy gave his breast to the bullets of a mob. I'm going to repeat that. It is but the other day that the brave Lovejoy gave his breast to the bullets of a mob for the right of free speech and opinion, and died when it was better not to live. I see not any road of perfect peace with a man can. I see not any road of perfect peace which a man can walk, but after the counsel of his own bosom. Let him quit too much association. Let him go home much, and establish himself in those courses he approves. The unremitting retention of simple and high sentiments in obscure duties is hardening the character to that temper which will work with honor, if need be in the tumult or on the scaffold. Whatever outrages have happened to men may be fully man again, and very easily in a republic, if there appear any signs of a decay of religion, coarse slander, fire, tar, and feathers, and the gibbet, the youth may freely bring home to his mind, and with what sweetness of temper he can, and inquire how fast he can fix his sense of duty, braving such penalties, whenever it may please the next newspaper, and a sufficient number of his neighbors to pronounce his opinions incendiary. I think it's incendiary. 260. It may calm the apprehension of calamity, as the most susceptible heart, to see how quick a bound nature has set to the utmost inflection of malice. We rapidly approach a brink over which no enemy can follow us. Quote, let them rave, thou art quiet in thy grave. End quote. In the gloom of our ignorance of what shall be, in the hour when we are deaf to the higher voices, who does not envy those who have seen safely to an end that manful endeavor? Who that see the meanness of our politics but inly congratulates Washington that he is long already wrapped in his shroud and forever safe? That he has laid sweet in his grave the hope of humanity not yet subjugated in him? Who does not sometimes envy the good and brave who are no more to suffer from the tumults of the natural world, and await with curious complacency the speedy term of his own conversation with finite nature? And yet the love that will be annihilated sooner than treacherous has already made death impossible, and infirms itself no mortal, but a native of the deeps of absolute and indistinguishable being. The Oversoul, which is a new book. We are currently on page 261. The Oversoul. Quote, but souls that of his own good life partake, he loves as his own self, dear as his eye. They are to him, he'll never them forsake. When they shall die, the God himself shall die. They live in blessed eternity. End quote. Henry Moore. Space is ample, east and west, but two cannot go abreast. Cannot travel in it too, yonder masterful cuckoo crowds every egg out of the nest, quick or dead, except its own. A spell is laid on sod and stone, night and day've been tampered with. Every quality and pith surcharged and sultry with a power that works its will on age and hour. There is a difference between one and another hour of life in their authority and subsequent effect. Our faith comes in moments. Our voice is habitual, yet there is a depth in these brief moments which constrains us to ascribe more readily to them than to all other experiences. For this reason, the argument which is also always forthcoming to silence those who conceive extraordinary hopes of man, namely the appeal to experience, is forever invalid and vain. We give up the past to the objector, and yet we hope. He must explain this hope. We grant that human life is mean, but how did we find out that it was mean? What is the ground of this uneasiness of ours, of this old discontent? What is universal sense of want and ignorance but the fine innuendo by which a soul makes its enormous claim? Why do men feel that the natural history of man has never been written, but he is always leaving behind what you have said of him, and it becomes old and books of metaphysics worthless? The philosophy of 6,000 years is not searched the chambers and magazines of the soul. In its experiments, there has always remained, in last analysis, a residuum it could not resolve. Man is a stream whose source is hidden. Our being is descending into us from we know not whence. The most exact calculator has no prescience. The somewhat incalculable may not balk the very next moment. I am constrained every moment to acknowledge a higher origin for events than the will I call mine. I'm going to end here. We've reached page 262. Please leave your feedback. Let me know what you thought about the ideas I've shared through my reading, what you took from it, and what do you think about my reading style. I look forward to seeing your comments, your feedback, your thoughts in the comment section down below. Please smash the like button if you haven't done so already. And if you haven't subscribed yet, please do so now. It's important for the algorithm of YouTube to get this video shared further. I look forward to seeing your comments and your feedback. And subscribe, please, if you haven't already. Sending you lots of love. Have a beautiful day going forward. Thank you for taking the time out of your busy day to read with me. I appreciate it. Keep on shining your glory. Keep on shining your light. You are a beacon of hope and light and love. Great to speak to you. Take care. Have a lovely day.